And then also at the SUE level, your SUE contractors that are out there, I'm starting to see them not necessarily provide a SUE package every time. There's a mix. They're maybe producing a map, but it isn't an official SUE product that they're giving their client. So the line, I think, is starting to get blurred a lot.
Well, I think one of the issues is and certainly the way that we look at it is you have to understand what's the client wanting. What do they need in order to proceed with their project. So, in a lot of cases, perhaps they only need what I would call a private locate, where they don't need an actual engineer report, they don't need a CAD drawing, they don't need it to be surveyed. They're just basically looking for information, paint on the ground is what it boils down to. So we do perform those type of services as the client dictates. However, one of the things that I think in actually the new standard that's about to be issued, it very cleanly says that locates that are performed by outside services, in other words by private locators, if they are brought into that engineering design, they are no better than quality level D ever. So even if they were surveyed in or what have you, they cannot be considered anything more than quality level D, because that work needs to be performed under the direction and the guidance of the engineer that's signing and sealing that. And if they're not direct employees of that engineer, then they're not under that direction.
So do you think, I'd be interested to know your opinion on this, do you think that there should be some sort of specifications, some sort of a clean break between the private locator and the SUE provider? Should there be another standard for the private locator? Because right now, if all of a sudden I want to buy a truck and the equipment, I could go out and call myself a private locator.
Right.
And there's nobody policing my quality other than the industry and my clients, right? So.
Right, but I think that's really market driven, market condition. It's the client. What are they demanding? What are they requesting? What do they require? I think it's contingent on them to understand what it is that they need as a deliverable. What's the end result that they have to get to, and then how do they get there? There's certainly a myriad of instances where we don't provide any sort of signed and sealed document to a client because they made a determination that they did not need that to get where they needed to go. On the other hand, though, there are many instances where we are providing signed and sealed documents because they need that information and they need to have somebody certifying the pedigree of the data that they're receiving. So.
I suppose it goes back to what you said though about a two-tier system, who's accountable for those private locates. Are they actually advising their customers correctly? They may not want to give up the work and say, well, you just need a private locate, where actually they need the details and the information from a SUFA. They may not be quality checking anything, but they're saying, well, we can't do it, but we can hook a GPS up and give you a GPS map, and
Well, and there's some issues with that too, because in a lot of states, if you do that, you're surveying without a license.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some other implications that you could run into in those regards.
And if they don't Jimmy, we're going to come in there. I'm going to say, if that doesn't trip them up, it goes back to market driven, right? Mm-hmm. If you promise falsely to that client, whether it's you don't have the experience to know what you're doing, or whether it's, hey, we're this level but we're not, if there is no legal issue there, they're probably still not going to get a call back at a later date. So yes, I think there could be an advantage to having a standard at some point. I think it's something the industry will probably push for eventually. But right now, it's totally market driven from both ends.
Yeah, I think there's a place for both sides of that equation to play. Just because we produce a map that we have signed and sealed, we've indicated its accuracy by assigning a pedigree to the information that's on that map. Does a directional driller still need to have private locate work done? Do they still need to do a vacuum pothole to visually, lay eyes on where that utility is before they cross it? Yeah, and Most of the time, in fact, there are many scopes and specifications that require the directional drillers to expose the facilities, even though we may have gone out and provided that map and indicated, at least up through quality level B where that facility is. They still, by their scope, have to expose it.
See, the problem is that there's still a large population of, excavation type practices that we'll call 811, which is the right thing to do, right? And then they leave it at that,
Right.
They think they've done their legal responsibility, their due diligence, and that's where it stops.
Right.
And I would bet even a poor private utility locate would be better in a lot of times than not, stopping at 811.
Right.
So you have 811, which is, highly defined what their best practices are for each one of those guys that goes out and does that work. And then you've got Sue, and then you've got this wild, wild west in the middle where you can't really ensure that anybody's actually doing the right thing, right? Using the right technologies.
Sure.
And then if you look at regular specifications by large contractors, there's a deficit in education there where they're just saying, locate all underground utilities before excavation.
Right.
Right. So that's incredibly broad. And,
Very.
And how do you interpret that? Depends on who you are and how you want to operate your excavation company
Right.
or directional drilling, right?
Yeah.
And
What level
so-
of risk are you willing to accept?
Exactly. Right.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that analysis. There is a huge void potentially in there. 811, I mean, it is by statute the legal requirement, and certainly, the only reason that a lot of companies follow it is because legally they're required to. If there wasn't some statute backing it up, they wouldn't even call 811, right?